guys know, I'm sure you feel like you have not had enough of them, and you will not have had enough of them. So, Spencer, where's Spencer? Raise your hand. Is playing tomorrow at Fourth Tap Brewing Co-op. So make sure that you are there for that. And then the whole group here will be featured extensively at Fourth Tap Brewing Co-op on Tuesday night, which our Solstice Festival, started off as 1-2 nights. And how it turned into 17 events, I have no idea how that happened. But the big Solstice Festival blowout thing is happening on Solstice Eve, which is Tuesday, June 20th. And that's at Fourth Tap Brewing Co-op.
Yeah, if you like what you've heard, we're going to be playing a lot of that again, plus some extras. If you didn't like what you heard, come back and give us another chance.
All right, and we're very lucky that tonight we get to hear more from our dear Carrie Fountain. It's not a heavy music stand. There's nothing heavy about it. Just kidding. Okay, now I feel like I'm in my element. I'm going to read some poems. I'm going to start with this poem that sort of requires that you know a little bit about this totally screwed up Russian folk tale called Masha and the Bear, which is also the name of a popular children's cartoon, which is totally bizarre when you hear the tale. Masha goes out into the forest, this is an abbreviated version, goes out into the forest with her friends. Her grandparents warn her not to get lost, not to wander off. She wanders off and eventually comes to a house, goes in the house, sort of while she's there, the person, or the bear that owns the house, comes in and finds her there, and he essentially just sort of turns her into his, slave or wife, kind of depending on who you're, the perspective of the story. And so she sort of spends a lot of time trying to figure out how to escape from him, and finally decides that she will ask him if she can deliver some pies to her grandparents. She will come back. She promises she will come back. He says, this is the greatest part. He says, it's not that he says he doesn't trust her that she'll come back. He says, you'll get lost. It's such a man thing to say. You'll get lost. And so she says, well, you deliver the pies to my grandparents. And then she bakes the pies. While he's not looking, she climbs into the basket with the pies and is thusly delivered back to her grandparents, who really in the beginning are kind of crappy about you're such an airhead, don't wander off. So that's everything you need to know about this. That's going to take longer than the poem. But, so this poem is called Masha, eventually. At first I couldn't decide if I should call the bear it, or if I should call the bear him. At first this distinction was important to me. And because it was a problem I could solve entirely within my own body, I worked on it daily, like a chore, until everything inside me was arranged in neat columns, pile of clean laundry, stack of clean dishes. I'd gotten myself into this mess, I could hear my grandmother saying, from her own reprehensible century. Now I'd pay the price of my girlhood, as all women must. Okay, I thought. Maybe this is a rite of passage. I was, after all, a woman in the eyes of the bear, and so in the eyes of the bear, I tried to find the moral of my story, but I never did. Too often I blacked out, the pain and fear ripping through my woman's body, exposing the girl's bones beneath, the girl's blood, upon which the ships of this world had for so long been kept afloat. The sun coming through the clean windows in the morning was still sometimes enough to make me glow with happiness. But even that became disgusting eventually, that weakness in me, that beauty. One evening I checked to see if the problem was solved, but found I couldn't remember why I cared. The answer had slipped from my grasp. One moment I was beating the rugs, coming to a conclusion. The next I was washing the teapot, thinking of exactly nothing. That's when I knew it didn't matter. The bear was an it, a dumb thing with needs and teeth, a thing into the hand of which I could climb and from which I could stay hidden if it didn't find me and eat me first, bone and blood, hair and clothing. I liked imagining the look of wonder on my grandmother's face as she opened the door to see me there, returned. I took my chances. It's called After Ascension. It's sort of it's about the time after the ascension of Christ. At the end, everything happened in a hurry. It felt like things would never stop happening. Then he was gone, and everything stopped happening, and the world was the same as it had been before. He was gone, and we were here. He'd left us behind. The promise felt very far that day. Everything felt far and still and quiet. No one wanted to look at each other, but we had to. We had to. That day, and then the next day, like learning how to walk again on a newly healed bone. Then the days started looking similar, feeling similar. Waking, it was the first thought to occur. This is the feeling of rising with faith alone. This is the way you put your feet to the floor and stand and bear the mourning, the weight of mourning. We had to learn this grief. We had to come to understand this would always be the first thought. Things hadn't worked out the way we thought they would. We'd lost our loved one and were to be marked through the ages by love and grief. So we learned grief. We learned some from the widows and more from the widowers, and we learned the most from the mothers who'd lost children. We'd learned everything about grief from the mothers. His mother, too. She taught us to grieve while she learned herself. Eventually, we'd begin dying, too. Some of us wondered about that. Would it happen? But of course it would happen. This was the very promise we lived by. And I'm going to read a poem. Just going to read a few poems from my books. I'm going to start with this poem from Instant Winter, a poem my husband suggested I read. It's called, so this poem is sort of like, has a series of poems throughout it called Prayers, and they're sort of just labeled with like there's a lot of them, so rather than numbering them, I just sort of used a little phrase from the poem to distinguish it from the other prayers. So this poem is called Prayer, Become a Buffalo. Oh, the first word is my husband. No wonder he wants me to do it. Big surprise. Prayer, Become a Buffalo. My husband and I have these conversations about moving to the high desert mountains. Maybe eventually our conversations will sprout saplings, and what will begin as a pin on the horizon will become a buffalo. Who cares if we ever move out of this house with its fake wood floors and broken door in the bathroom? My husband tries to help me with my prayers, but I do not pray anymore, and I do not know how to pray, though I spend so much of my time wishing I knew how to pray, which I suppose is very close to praying, maybe as close as I'll ever get. Inside the body, everything is real. Here are the babies, 2 fat feet dangling under the kitchen table. Here is the baby, holding one yellow spoon, while her father feeds her with another. You fixed that door in the bathroom. What a hero. Father's Day is tomorrow. Yeah, I'm going to read this poem. This poem takes place in Austin, so I thought you guys might recognize the state capitol building. Highly recognizable. This poem is called The Parable of the Talents, which is one of the parables of Jesus that is most like it's controversial. Like, you can sort of read the parable of the talents. I'm not going to explain the parable of the talents, because I already explained that Russian folk tale to people. But it's one of these ones where, like, it can almost mean the exact opposite of what, like, you know, and it has caused conversations between sort of the liberation theology and, like, what is that, the gospel of, like, prosperity gospel. It sort of draws a big distinction, sort of how you see the parable of the talents. And yeah. You like literally don't know how, you don't need to know that at all. I don't know why this comes up. Parable of the talents. The man in the pig suit is back, standing outside the gates of the state capitol, holding a sign that reads, "Lawyers are swine." His bitter face only just visible inside the soiled pink vinyl, his outrage clamoring over the westbound traffic on 11th. It's so heavy, believing there is a story in every moment, every person. All those spots you press to find they're rotted straight through, all those ropes of thickened scar tissue, the divorce gone bad, the drunk driver gone free. It's always complicated, even when the message is, fuck it. He makes me think of Susan, beginning to cry, asking, who do you think Jesus will come to first, if not the insane and the depraved? See, that was a complicated moment for me, as my jealousy of Susan's faith was exactly equal to my jealousy of the insane and depraved to whom Jesus would come. The light stays red longer than I expect it to. It turns green, and I watch the cars as they turn south on Congress, as they go on with their lives. In the back seat, the baby is silent. No words yet, not a single word, only sound. She is pure of story, sitting, facing backward, looking up, maybe to the rotunda, where the great woman of Texas stands all day and night in her robe with her arm extended elegantly toward heaven, holding that one big star above her head. Strange woman. I read somewhere that to make her recognizable from this far, her features had to be exaggerated beyond recognition, and that, up close, she looks like a monster. They have that, they took one down and they put it in the museum. And it's true. Really, like, you know, the sort of like eyes are very deeply. I'm going to read one poem from my first book, Burn Lake. This one, again, this is like a poem that I like to read the epigraph of this poem. A lot of the poems in this book are about the conquest of again, this is like the parable of the talent. Some you would call it the conquest, and some people would call it the, you know, discovery of the new world. So this poem is, so a lot of the poems are about this journey made by Don Juan de Oñate, who was a Spaniard who was in Mexico City, who was sort of dispatched by the Viceroy, I think, of Spain, which was occupying Mexico City at the time in the late 1500s. And they drew up this very complicated contract. And in the contract, there's a rider in the contract. So he's going from Mexico City, and his journey ends at Santa Fe. So it's up through the deserts of New Mexico. What is in New Mexico now? And I mean, you know, there's like a part of New Mexico called the Jornada del Muerto, which is like the path of death. Like people just die. So it's very ironic because there's a writer in the contract. This is how much they knew about where he was going. It says, if in the said provinces any seaports should be found on the North Sea, you shall notify the Viceroy of New Spain, telling him the news and giving him an accurate report of the configuration of the coast and the capacity of each harbor. So I just love that. It's just so perfect a metaphor. It's just such a right metaphor. So this poem is called The Coast. Like anything imagined, it goes on forever if you want it to go on forever. If you want it to be just over the horizon, you'll keep seeing in the waves of hot air coming up from the desert floor the bright blue grimace of the ocean. Last night, after falling asleep reading the tedious and turgid documents of the Coronado expedition, I woke and didn't know anything about myself. My life came back in rivulets, the red couch in my office, the dog on her bed, looking up now, and behind all that, a big, dim memory. The New Year's Eve, Liz and I snuck out of our beds and walked a few blocks to my father's bar, and through the dark windows, saw our parents existing in there without us, weird and sexual, my mother with a peacock feather in her hair, her full breasts lit by the face of the jukebox. It was after midnight. Someone was going around popping balloons with a lit cigarette. We watched for a long time. We watched, and then we walked home under the black winter sky, and the new year opened its mouth and swallowed us. What I thought we'd find there, we hadn't found. Now when I remember my mother leaning against the jukebox like that, 35, maybe 40, wearing a yellow sweater, a loose perm on her head, though I know it didn't happen this way, I can't help but remember that she turned and looked, squinting through the low windows, and seeing me there, swung her whole body around, hips first, as if to let me get a better look at her. When I woke, the dog stood up, startled, and the book fell closed in my lap. On the cover, a colorful image of a fat priest blessing Indians in the desert. The image is so crude, hard to tell who believes this is the beginning and who believes this is the end. And I'm going to read one last poem. It's always good to announce when you're going to read your last poem. It's like dread, like how long is this going to go on? I like to announce it. It's coming to you right now. I obviously have a obsession with both religions and cults. So this poem is called "I Wish I Had a Guru." I did a lot of research into cults for writing my book, even though I didn't even need to. There's like no reference. I got a little obsessed. But so this poem is called "I Wish I Had a Guru." Thank you guys again so much for having me. Thank you all for coming. This has been such lovely. Your music is amazing. I wish I had a guru. I want a bad one. The kind who takes all the measly particulars of life and works them into one simple, messed up thing. A wad of gum a child is forced to spit into her mother's upturned palm before entering the public library. A cloud, far off, emitting a song you can almost place, but can't quite place. Was that song playing the night I drove myself to the emergency room? I wish I could be brainwashed, because brainwashing sounds great, like the feeling you get when you stand up too quickly and sense you're going to faint, but know in the same instant that you're not going to faint. That feeling like standing next to yourself, like starting all over again in white, legs shaved, hair cleanly parted, like sound check, 1, 2, 1, 2, until your soiled, crying life sees you through the crowd and rushes to you, reaching you just as you're pushing through the emergency exit, just as the alarm bells go off stingingly, grabbing hold of your thigh, claiming you, so that you understand suddenly and only for an instant that you are one being inside one body, sealed, exquisite, animate, that you were made from others and came from a far, unseeable place, a source that cannot be traced, and that you will continue to take what you are handed and run. You will run as far and as fast as you can, with whatever breath you have, right up until the end. That feeling. It's like sliding your 2 hands beneath the whole frosted cake of your life, lifting it carefully from the platter and shoving it into your face. The whole time saying, "Oh, now this is a really bad idea."